I'm not sure if you're aware, but there are various days recognized every day of the year. Did you know that? In fact, oftentimes there are several on the same day. For instance, January 12th is Kiss a Ginger Day. So if you have red hair and don't like to be kissed, you want to run for the hills on January 12th. The first Friday that falls on the 13th is Blame Someone Else Day. And September 19th, which is a Sunday this year, it is Talk Like a Pirate Day. And so prepare all your pirate lingo and accents for September 19th. Now, there is no government agency that approves or promotes these days. It seems there are a couple of prominent places that boast they have the best calendar and encourage submissions. Just about every category of food has a day. So if you have a particular favorite, Google it, and I'm sure there's a day of the year where it's pizza, pasta, ice cream, whatever it might be. Any aspect of life, you can find a day that honors it, I just about assure you. And many famous people have their birthdays recognized in a day. Like there is a Rosa Parks Day, for instance, and so I can't remember what day that is, but it's her birthday in terms of recognizing the significance of her life and how she changed America in her act of bravery in terms of seeking racial justice. But it appears that anyone can submit an idea, and if it takes off, you may find yourself immortalized in the National Day calendar. You know, you think about how Prince Spaghetti wanted a day a week, Prince Spaghetti Day. But you think about, the promotion of that, and who of us don't remember that Wednesday is Prince Spaghetti Day, right? And just by the mere suggestion that Wednesday is Prince Spaghetti Day, didn't you feel a compulsion back when that promotion was on to have pizza, have spaghetti on Wednesday? And so therefore, again, that idea kind of took off, and people started thinking that's the similar way in terms of how that works. I mean, some days, like I said, have several things memorialized on a day, like June 1st is Heimlich Maneuver Day, Dare Day, and Flip a Coin Day. But for a day like the second Sunday in May, Mother's Day, it maintains exclusive rights. And certainly that is fitting. But why have a day like this at all, or any other holiday as well? Well, I think it's because it is important to remember. I mean, if there's anything the Bible encourages us to do in our lives is to remember, to make sure we don't forget the things of God. The word is actually used 352 times in the Bible, in fact. But why is it so important to remember? I mean, I think first, the reason why it's important for us to remember really all things, but particularly the things of God, and this morning, particularly mothers, is it really is an essential part of knowledge. We think about what knowledge is, and just imagine that if you had to relearn everything every single time. Just think about the fact that you learn something, you know something, and then you forget it. You need to relearn it all the time. That really wouldn't work in the world, wouldn't it? Oftentimes, you've heard me say pretty consistently that there aren't too many things in our lives that are there just by the nature of how things are. It's always by God's intent in terms of how He created us. So just think about the wisdom that God had to give us memory. The fact that, again, when you learn something, you'd be able to retain it and then bring it to a different circumstance and apply it to that circumstance. Now, I think some of us are heading to that time where we may forget things more than we remember things. Maybe we might need to relearn them every single day. But even in the absence of memory, I think it just reinforces the importance of it. I think, secondly, it is important to remember because we have a strong tendency to forget, especially remembering the significance of people. And ladies, I think you do better than men in this regard. I think for you ladies, when you talk about a significant thing that's coming up, whether it's Father's Day or whether it's birthdays, you know weeks in advance what you're going to do, the thing you're going to buy. For men, there's some that are going to leave service today to go out and buy their mother a gift. in terms of just the way we're wired, the way we're made, in terms of how we embrace things and how we remember things and how we engage with things. No, I think there are exceptions to that naturally, but, when you think about why there are signs in the stores to remember Mother's Day, because we men need it. Basically, the reason why there's Remember Father's Day is that's for all the sons. The girls don't need that. In terms of just what they would prioritize and remember. And so again, our tendency to forget is just why remembering is so important. The third reason it is important to remember, and I think this is the most important, is to guard against familiarity. The third reason why it's important to remember is it is to guard against familiarity. Hopefully you would all agree that in addition to remembering information when we remember, we also remember the significance of something as well, because it is far too easy to become familiar with things, right? When you think about just the nature of how information is, how the nature of our experience of life is, that it's almost by definition that if we just let things happen the way they would, that we would become familiar with things. Just think about, again, your first engagement with something. The first time you experience something, all aspects of your being are engaged. You're experiencing this for the first time. So sight and sound and feel and hearing and all the things that we're experiencing in the context of that. But you continue that experience, and at some point in time, we just get familiar with it. Think about that song, that a favorite song of yours, and maybe the first time you heard it, or again, you're listening to the oldies station, you're thinking about that song that they played in high school, and all of a sudden, all those memories come back, and oh, that's right, I remember the Chevy and the bright blue jeans, and the biggest one we ever got was doing the thing called Crocodile Rock, right? Again, it brings back all those memories, and wow, isn't that a great song? And I remember that song, and I love that song. Well, now, imagine playing it 10 times. Oh, will this song never stop? Stop it, turn that down, turn it off. I think about in terms of my familiarity, how much I'm a big fan of Corn on the Cob, and there's nothing better at the beginning of August to get that first fresh Rhode Island corn on the cob and get it on the plate and douse it with butter and put on the salt, and oh, that is so good. But then by the end of August, corn again? Are we really eating corn? Again, that's the nature of life, right? That's the nature of how we engage with experience and information. But when we think about things that are important, we know that we never want to become familiar with those things, right? And the point that I would make in the context of this message is that when it comes to things that are important, sometimes what we need to do is we need to infuse those things with meaning. We have to infuse those things with importance. Because if we just allow things to happen naturally, we will naturally become familiar with things that are very important. Again, you think about why would we have Mother's Day? Because we have to remember how significant motherhood is. All the things that it means to us. And again, because otherwise we would just be living our lives and we'd be children and we'd be just experiencing the wonderfulness of our mothers and their care and their treatment of us, their taking care of us. Or again, the women that we grew up with and just forgetting them, and you don't call, you don't visit, all those things. And so therefore to have a day that sparks something in us, that breaks through that familiarity, is vitally important. Just think about what is true in terms of our lives, in terms of how we engage with God, how important it is for us to engage meaning, to infuse meaning into things. Naturally, we never want to infuse meaning into things that don't have meaning. And we have a lot of people in the world infusing meaning into things that don't have meaning. I had a conversation with someone this week that talked about how her having her ancestors involved in her life encourages her life a lot. And I asked her, well, where does that come from? Like, on what basis do you have that awareness or that confidence that that's even happening? Oh, I don't know, but it just helps me. You know, our minds are very powerful things in terms of us projecting meaning on things that have no meaning, but that can even have an effect on us even though it doesn't have meaning. I mean, just think about all the false religions that are out there in the world, and people are projecting meaning on things that don't have meaning. But we have to understand, in terms of our faith, the truth and reality of God as our creator, of Christ in terms of his life on the earth, Christ in terms of the cross and his resurrection, that has absolute meaning. And yet when we get to a point where that meaning goes away, where again we become familiar with it, that's where the Bible comes along and says, remember, don't forget who I am. Don't forget what I've done. Don't forget the promises I've made. You know, at any point in time, when you say to yourself, I don't feel like doing something that is important, and then it leads you not to do it, what does that say about our lives? I mean, who of us can't testify to the fact that we do that? You know, I don't feel like, again, reading my Bible. I don't feel like praying. I don't feel like going to church. You know, you even make a worldly example of that. I don't feel like brushing my teeth. You know, so therefore you don't feel like brushing your teeth. And yet when you think about what happens when you don't brush your teeth, in terms of the tooth decay that happens and how, you know, the teeth that God has given you, it's only one set. And there are improvements and there are things that people can do in terms of making things, you know, better in terms of your oral health. You know something, if you don't brush your teeth, bad things are going to happen. But again, you can say, boy, I don't feel like doing that, and yet you should infuse that with meaning, right? I mean, isn't that what you do as parents? When your kids say, boy, I don't want to take a bath, or I don't want to brush my teeth, you come along and you say, well, if you don't do this, this is going to happen, or that's going to happen. You infuse it with meaning. And so just extrapolate that again to Mother's Day, to God. Again, if you don't have like the things that have meaning, that are essential in themselves, you don't have to make up the meaning. The meaning is already there. You just have to reinforce it. Like, you have to engage it. You have to infuse it for yourself. So in other words, God is meaningful in terms of who he is. Your mother is meaningful just because of who she is and what she represents in your life. So you don't have to make up meaning, but you just have to reinforce it in your life. Again, you have to remember it. You have to be enthused in it. See, what we find oftentimes in our lives is that information is not enough. It's not enough just to know something. Like, you will not continue to be engaged in something that you just know. But when you are enthusiastic, that is the thing that motivates and drives and continues to push you along in terms of what you're doing. And so to me, a day like Mother's Day, again, crush a can day? Yeah, we might not need that. Like, it's not an essential aspect of life that we remember what day we're honoring flipping a coin. You know, maybe the Heimlich maneuver, maybe that's something to recognize how many lives have been saved by that maneuver that was developed. But, you know, when we think about Mother's Day, when we think about the holidays that we celebrate in terms of just recognizing different works that Christ has brought in the world, again, so important for us to remember to guard against this familiarity that we can have develop in our lives. Again, we need to infuse things with meaning, not because they don't have meaning in and of themselves, but we have to give it meaning. We have to give it meaning for ourselves, for us to be engaged in the significance of it. So, we've talked about why it's important to remember. Now let's talk about why it is important to remember Mother's Day. And so I think the first reason naturally is because God said so. When you think about what the fifth commandment is, I think it's Exodus 20:12. Honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land and the Lord your God is giving you. And so here it is. Here's how important Mother's Day is, that God makes it one of the 10 most important in terms of the 10 commandments that he gives. But we have to understand the significance of this command in relation to the other commands. And for anyone that has studied the 10 commandments, they know that the first 4 commands have to do with the person of God. Honor the Lord, don't take his name in vain, remember the Sabbath, in terms of what it says about the person of God. And then from 5 through 10, he starts talking about the rules and the commands that are about human life. It's about interaction in terms of society. And the first thing God points to is honor your father and your mother. That the thing that makes all of it work, the thing that starts the ball rolling in terms of what we need to be thinking about in our lives to make us the people that God wants us to be, is something? When you're the child, when you're the person that's in the home, and God has intended for there to be a mom and dad that is above you, that is teaching you, that is disciplining you, that is correcting you, and leading you, that you are to honor them. And that word honor means to give weight to glorify, to esteem in terms of the honor that we give. And so God orchestrated something essential in what he made in making a father and a mother. If we then extrapolate from that to think about just what he made in making a man and a woman, and how different we are, how clearly the dynamic, and again, there's exceptions to the rules there, but to recognize just how he made a man and what a father would then become because the way he made a man, and how he made a woman, and what that would mean in terms of what motherhood would become. Again, it's an essential part of what God desired for his creation, how God desired in terms of the orchestration of the world. I mean, when you think about it, humans were not the ones who thought about Mother's Day. Humans were not the ones that you women did not make yourself a mother. God made you a mother, and he made you the way he was so you would be a mother. And so therefore, you were a mother first and foremost by who you are, and then only secondarily because of what you do. See, we tend to classify things. We tend to orient things, say the mother does this, the mother does that, the father does this, the father does this, a woman does this, a man does this. There's something more essential than the things you do, and that is how God has made you. In terms of you think about just how women just tend to be more oriented to relationship. They're more oriented to the needs of people. Basically, my wife always encourages me in terms of me buying her gifts. She doesn't care what she gets, what she tells me, is just show me that you remembered me. Just show me that in all the things you're doing in your life, there was a time that you thought of me, you went to the store, you bought the gift, you got the card, and that's what she's looking for. And I think that is an expression of, again, the essential nature of a relationship that is in a woman, that is in a mother. I mean, men, we really don't care what we get. We just don't want you to go against us. We're like, we don't need a gift. Just don't ruin things. Don't give us more that we wouldn't want to have. We just want to live our lives and do our thing, and just don't mess it up. That's what a man wants. And so, and unfortunately, ladies, sometimes communication and talking is just what messes it up. Can we just be silent? Can we? But see, that's completely inconsistent with how a woman is. Again, she cares about she cares about what you're thinking. We don't like that she cares about what we're thinking, but she cares about what you're thinking. and her mind is going a mile a minute, processing all the different things in terms of what she would need to manage, in terms of what you're thinking, why you're thinking it, what it means for her, what it means for the kids, what it means for the house, what it means for the future. And all of that is stirring around in her mind, and we're just saying, can I watch TV? Can we just watch the football? But again, when you think about what God orchestrated in terms of what he intended about what would come from a mother, what would come from a father, it's right again that we would remember that. And not only remembering in terms of not forgetting, but remembering in terms of the significance, the importance, the value that is in a mother. And so therefore we honor Mother's Day, again, because of what God established in his creation, what he commands in terms of the Bible, and just recognizing that he desires to structure a society. See, once God makes them male and female, and then says, be fruitful and multiply, there you have mothers and fathers, by definition. God reveals his plan. Then he comes on again in the Ten Commandments and says, by the way, when you think about what you move from and honoring me as God, the most important thing for you is to make sure you honor father and motherhood. Hopefully, in terms of the other reasons why we would remember Mother's Day and remember mothers, has a lot to do with what we've experienced for ourselves. You know, when we think about, again, just how fundamental the whole idea of motherhood is. You know, again, when you think about yourself and who you are as a mother, or again, women maybe that have desired to have children and haven't been able to have children, again, brokenness in terms of your relationship with your child, just realize that everyone has a mother. See, independent of what has happened in your life in terms of birthing children, every person has a mother in terms of what God intended for that to be and what appreciation you would have towards that person that raised you, that taught you, that was with you. She was the person that wanted to engage with you. The father, you know, back in the day, it would be like, yeah, leave me alone. Children are seen and not heard. Let me just do my thing and get my thing done. And hey, you want to join me? Okay, I'll teach you how to fix the thing or whatever. But you know, but mothers have always been about relationship and about caring and about nurturing and about, you know, wiping the skin knee and, you know, healing the emotional and physical boo-boos. That's the heart of a mother. You know, I also wonder to what extent, for those that Mother's Day would be challenging or difficult, again, whether it's about the way you were treated by your mother. See, I think another challenging thing that comes in terms of Mother's Day, when you talk about honoring your mother or remembering your mother, and the rare people that had a poor mother, that their mother hurt them rather than help them, all the visions and all the descriptions that come about what a good mother would be. And you know something? That wasn't my mother. My mother didn't do that. Just realize that God would want you to use a day like this, again, to receive his consolation, to look for his wisdom, to look for the forgiveness that he would have towards you, the forgiveness that you would have him have towards others. You know, we have to understand that there are fundamental things that happen with us as children, that when it's happening to us as children, we internalize those things as children. And there's a place as we grow older for us to process those things as adults and to allow your adult perspective to look into that situation and say, okay, what truth does God have for that little girl? What truth does God have in terms of what was happening in that adult's life? You know, what compassion might I have towards my mother if she was a bad mother because of what her mother or father was like, what her experience of life would be? But I think in terms of us remembering, to remember God's intent, to remember God's desire in terms of what he would put in place as far as what motherhood would be, again, we honor that. We honor mothers. We find God's purposes. We find God's provision in terms of all the things that we would seek to learn and grow from and receive from him, again, to the extent that, again, Mother's Day is a gladdened affair, it's a good thing, then let it be that, and all that God would intend, and all that God would reinforce, and all the things that God would say, good job, pat on the back, you've done it well. And yet for those people that have issues with what Mother's Day is, well, God wants to be present with you. You know what's amazing for God is both a father and a mother in terms of his, leadership and his discipline and him, controlling things, but other than the side of him in terms of his compassion and his care and his mercy. That God has a purpose for all of it, and he is the consolation. He is the resolution point to every aspect of life. And so again, a day like today, we're called to remember something that is significant, that is meaningful, regardless of what you think, and finding God's purpose in that. Well, something, this is all a very natural transition between the other thing that we're doing today in terms of just doing communion. Again, when we think about the significance of remembering a mother, again, breaking out of that familiarity, breaking out of our tendency just to forget things that are important. The responsibility we have to inspire our own souls. We can't expect for passion to come naturally. Again, towards things that are important. Sometimes passion does come naturally, but when it doesn't, to meaningful things, we inspire our own souls. Boy, I don't feel like celebrating mothers today. Well, you know something? You celebrate it anyways because you should, and it's meaningful. I don't feel like going to church. I don't feel like reading the Bible. You do that because you need to inspire yourself. If inspiration doesn't come from the outside when it comes to meaningful things, you do it from the inside, and you make it happen because this is what's important. This is what is meaningful. I mean, the most important person to say to us, remember, for Jesus to say, do this in remembrance of me. Like, why would Jesus do that? Because again, we would tend to forget. We would tend to lose the significance and the importance of what he has done. And so when we think about how it is right for us to regard mothers, how even more important it is for us to make sure we're remembering God. And when it comes to our lives in him, when feelings, when emotions, when circumstances are coming along and taking away that passion, we build that passion back up. Because that's the thing that makes it sustained. It's us being invigorated in terms of the information, passionate about the information, because that is who God is, and that is certainly what he deserves and what makes it work in terms of us are continuing to engage in those things and breaking through that familiarity that is very easy to sink in. So let's bow and let's pray. Father, we do come before you and just thank you for all the things that you have established in your word to help us remember. Father, when we think about all the things you did in the community of Israel to help them remember you, Father, it makes me think how many things are in our lives to help us remember you in terms of how our society is structured, how our families are structured, how my life is structured, in terms of the things that I would meet my dull heart, my stubborn heart, with the passion and the meaning that God would intend. And so, Father, I just pray that you would meet us each where we are, to the extent that we are not making significant the things that are significant. Help us to see that, understand it, and change it. For the things that we're making significant that aren't significant, I pray that you would help us to see that and we would change it. But Father, in all, that you would be glorified, that that our hearts and our minds and our lives would be transformed into what you desire for us to be. And so, Father, I just do pray that you use this message, to use this time of communion, even to reinforce how important it is for us to remember you and the work that you have done on our behalf. It is in your Son, Jesus Christ's name, that we do pray. Amen.